The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering into 1,000 glittering pieces on the marble floor. Around me, the chatter of Manhattan's elite continued uninterrupted. No one noticed the woman in the corner, having her world destroyed by a single glance across the room. There they were. My husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, and his new fiancée, Olivia Westbrook. She sparkled in diamonds that cost more than my yearly salary, while he beamed with newfound confidence that came from trading up to a better model. "Nina," a concerned voice broke through my spiral. "Nina, are you okay?" I turned to find Eliza, my closest friend since college, her face etched with worry. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the divorce began. "I've fine." The words came automatically, brittle and unconvincing. I didn't know they would be here. Eliza's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the damage, both the broken glass and my barely concealed emotional wreckage. "Of course they're here. It's the Westbrook Foundation Gala." Her voice turned bitter. "Daddy owns half of Manhattan." I closed my eyes briefly, cursing my stupidity. I should have connected the dots when my boss insisted I attend this charity event on behalf of our firm. Grant Pierce Butler LLC specialized in managing wealth for the ultra-rich, and the Westbrooks were exactly the type of client we pursued. My attendance was not optional, not if I wanted to keep my job. And I desperately needed to keep my job. The divorce had left me with nothing but debt and a studio apartment that made shoeboxes look spacious. "Nina Lawrence?" A waiter appeared with a dustpan, efficiently sweeping away the broken glass. "Mr. Butler would like to see you at table 4. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed the front of my dress, a designer knockoff I'd scored at a consignment shop, and squared my jaw. "Showtime," I muttered to Eliza. "Call me tomorrow," she whispered, squeezing my arm. Every excruciating detail. I navigated through the crowd toward table 4, my heart hammering against my ribs. Each step felt like walking through quicksand in stilettos. I kept my eyes fixed on my destination, refusing to look in their direction again. Grant Butler, CEO of our firm and my direct supervisor, beckoned me over with a wave. Beside him sat Howard Westbrook himself, Olivia's father and one of New York's most powerful real estate moguls. "Nina, there you are." Grant's smile was tight, professional. "I'd like you to meet Howard Westbrook." "Howard, this is Nina Lawrence, our newest Associate Director of Client Services." Howard's handshake was firm, his assessment swift and calculating. "Lawrence, any relation to the Boston Lawrences?"
"No, sir."
"Just ordinary Pennsylvania stock." I managed a smile that felt like cracking glass. 7 years in Manhattan's financial world had taught me how to perform under pressure. "Nina has a remarkable talent for anticipating client needs," Grant continued. "She's been instrumental in our emerging markets division." Howard nodded absently, clearly unimpressed by my non-pedigreed existence. "Actually, I believe you might know my son-in-law-to-be." Howard gestured across the room. "Daniel." My stomach plummeted to my designer knockoff heels.
No.
Daniel Reed, my Daniel, once, turned at the sound of Howard's voice. His eyes widened fractionally when he spotted me, but his step never faltered as he approached our table, Olivia clinging to his arm like an elegant parasite. "Mr. Butler, good to see you again," Daniel said smoothly, shaking Grant's hand before his gaze slid to me. "Nina, what a surprise." "You two know each other?" Howard asked, his thick eyebrows rising. Daniel hesitated for a microsecond, but it was enough for me to see the calculation in his eyes. "Nina and I used to be married," he said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia's perfect features registered shock for a fleeting moment before she recovered. "Well, isn't this cozy? The ex-wife works for Daddy's investment firm." Her saccharine tone made my teeth ache. "Nina is one of our rising stars," Grant interjected, clearly sensing the tension. "In fact, she's being considered for the Franklin account." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. The Franklin account was worth millions in management fees. Once upon a time, he would have celebrated such an opportunity with me. Now he looked almost resentful. "How fortunate for her," Olivia said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Danny was just telling me how his startup is about to revolutionize fintech. Daddy's considering a major investment. She turned to me, her voice dripping with false concern. I heard you had to downsize after the divorce. Such a shame. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. The downsizing, she referred to as being forced to sell our Brooklyn brownstone, which I couldn't afford on my own, and move into a 400-square-foot studio while Daniel walked away with most of our liquid assets. His lawyer had been better than mine. Much better. Change can be clarifying, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Sometimes you discover your true worth only when everything familiar is stripped away. Daniel had the decency to look uncomfortable. Nina always did have a philosophical streak. How charming, Olivia said, examining her manicure. Well, we should circulate. Daddy, I'll see you at the podium in 20. As they walked away, I noticed Daniel's hand on the small of Olivia's back, exactly where it used to rest on mine. I apologize for the awkwardness, Grant said quietly. I had no idea about your connection to the Westbrooks. It's fine, I lied. Ancient history. But as I watched Daniel laugh at something Olivia whispered in his ear, the wound felt anything but ancient. 8 years of marriage, ended by a text message 6 months ago. We need to talk. This isn't working anymore. The talk had been brief. He'd met someone else. Someone who understood his ambitions. Someone whose connections could help his fledgling startup secure the funding it desperately needed. Someone who wasn't me. I excused myself from the table and headed for the restroom, needing a moment to regather my composure. Inside the opulent bathroom, I leaned against the marble counter and stared at my reflection. You will not cry, I told the woman in the mirror. Not here.
Not now.
Not over him. The bathroom door swung open, and Olivia sauntered in, her diamonds catching the light. She stopped short when she saw me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Nina, she said, setting her clutch on the counter. I was hoping we'd have a moment alone. I squared my shoulders. Olivia, congratulations on your engagement. So formal. She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. We're practically sisters now. Danny tells me everything. I doubted that very much. Daniel had never been one for full disclosure, not even with me. Does he? I asked mildly. She reapplied her lipstick, a shade of red that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He told me how desperate you were to hang on to him, how you begged. The lie stung more than it should have. I had never begged. I had been too shocked, too blindsided by his betrayal to do anything but stare numbly as he packed his things. I'm sure that's a comforting narrative for both of you, I said. She turned to face me fully. Let me be clear. Danny is mine now. And so is his little company. Daddy's investing $10 million to start, with more to follow. We're going to be very, very rich. Her smile was razor sharp. And you'll still be, what was it? An associate director? Managing other people's money, while barely making ends meet. Each word was designed to wound, to remind me of everything I'd lost. But underneath my pain, something else stirred. A slow-burning anger that had been simmering for months. Money isn't everything, Olivia, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Said every poor person ever. She picked up her clutch. Stay away from Danny. Tonight was uncomfortable enough. I'd hate for Grant Butler to hear rumors about your professional conduct. The threat was clear. She could damage my career with a whispered word in the right ear. Enjoy your evening, I said, refusing to engage further. After she sashayed out, I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. 6 months of carefully maintained composure threatened to crumble. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Eliza. SOS. Need extraction? I smiled despite everything. Eliza had always been my emergency contact, in every sense of the word. Not yet, I typed back. There's something I need to do first. I straightened my spine, fixed my makeup, and walked back into the gala with renewed purpose. I would not slink away in shame. I would not give Daniel and Olivia the satisfaction of driving me out. For the next hour, I circulated expertly, engaging with potential clients, laughing at mediocre jokes from wealth managers, and demonstrating exactly why Grant Butler considered me one of the firm's rising stars. All while maintaining a precise distance from my ex-husband and his sparkly new fiancée. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself alone at the bar, ordering a much-needed glass of whiskey neat. "Make that too," a deep voice said beside me. I turned to find a tall, silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Robert Franklin," he said, extending his hand. "You must be Nina Lawrence. Grant speaks highly of you." My heart skipped. Robert Franklin, as in the Franklin account, the client Grant had mentioned at the table. "Mr. Franklin," I said, shaking his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." He studied me with keen eyes. "I saw how you handled yourself tonight, with the Westbrook girl and your ex impressive composure." I froze. "You know about that?" He smiled, accepting his whiskey from the bartender. "Wall Street runs on gossip, Ms. Lawrence. The Daniel Reed-Olivia Westbrook engagement has been quite the topic, especially among those who remember when Reed was just another hungry banker married to a promising analyst." I sipped my whiskey, unsure how to respond. "What do you think of Westbrook's investment in Reed's company?" Franklin asked casually. The question felt loaded, but I decided honesty was my best option. TechVault has potential, but it's overvalued at Westbrook's investment level. They're buying the connection, not the technology. Franklin nodded thoughtfully. "And if you were managing my portfolio, would you recommend I invest in companies like TechVault?" "Without knowing your full investment strategy and risk tolerance, I couldn't say," I replied. "But generally, I prefer investments with stronger fundamentals and less emotional motivation." He laughed outright at that. Diplomatic, yet pointed. "I like that." He finished his whiskey and set down the glass. "I've been considering moving my accounts to Grant Pierce Butler. Would you be available for a meeting next week to discuss the possibilities?" I blinked, surprised by the directness. "Absolutely. I can coordinate with your office for a time that works." "Good." He handed me his card. "Call my private line. I think you and I could work well together, Ms. Lawrence." As he walked away, I stared at the embossed card in my hand. Robert Franklin, billionaire investor, philanthropist, and notoriously selective client, wanted me to handle his accounts. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Eliza. "Extraction time. Cars outside. Bring whiskey." I slipped Franklin's card into my clutch, drained my glass, and headed for the exit, careful to avoid any last-minute encounters with Daniel or Olivia. Outside, Eliza's car waited at the curb, a sanctuary from the emotional minefield inside. "So?" she demanded as I slid into the passenger seat. "How bad was it?" I leaned back against the headrest, closing my eyes. "Worse than I imagined. Better than it could have been." I opened my eyes and turned to her with a small, genuine smile. "And possibly the beginning of something unexpected." "Cryptic," she noted, pulling into traffic. "Spill all the details."
Now.
As we drove through the glittering Manhattan night, I recounted the evening's events, ending with Franklin's surprising offer. "Holy shit," Eliza breathed. "The Robert Franklin wants you to manage his money? That's huge, Nina. That's career-making." "If it happens," I cautioned. "Let's not count on hatched chickens." Always the pragmatist.
She grinned.
"But even the possibility is worth celebrating. And it happened on the same night you faced down the cheating ex and his trophy fiancé. That's poetic justice if I ever heard it." For the first time that evening, I laughed genuinely. "I wouldn't go that far." "I would." She turned serious for a moment. "You deserve this break, Nina. After everything Daniel put you through, walking out, taking the money, moving on so publicly, you deserve something good." I nodded, unexpected tears pricking my eyes. "Thanks for being there tonight. For the rescue." "Always," she promised, squeezing my hand. "Now, how about we stop for late-night pancakes and plot the complete financial destruction of Daniel Reed?" Tempting, I admitted. But I think I'd rather focus on building something for myself instead. The seed of an idea had been planted, one that had nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with reclaiming my own worth. Robert Franklin hadn't approached me because of my connection to Daniel or the Westbrooks. He'd sought me out because of my performance under pressure, my financial acumen. For the first time since Daniel's devastating text 6 months ago, I felt a flicker of something that felt suspiciously like hope. The Franklin account changed everything. Within 3 months, I had been promoted to Director of Strategic Accounts. Within 6, I had moved from my shoebox studio to a respectable one-bedroom on the Upper East Side. And within a year, Robert Franklin's recommendation had brought in 3 more ultra-high-net-worth clients. My life, which had seemed in free fall after Daniel's departure, had not only stabilized but began to soar. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Daniel had abandoned our marriage for Olivia's connections and money, I had found my own path to financial success, one based on merit rather than matrimony. I heard updates about them occasionally, usually through Eliza, who moved in social circles that overlapped with the Westbrooks. TechVault had launched to considerable fanfare, backed by Howard Westbrook's millions. Daniel and Olivia had purchased a penthouse in Tribeca. Their wedding was featured in Vogue. I deleted my social media accounts during the divorce, a self-preservation tactic that spared me the visual evidence of their happiness. Instead, I channeled all my energy into work and rebuilding. That single-minded focus paid off when Robert Franklin called me to his office on a crisp October morning, exactly 18 months after our first meeting at the gala. "Nina," he greeted warmly, rising from behind his massive desk. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Of course, Robert. We had progressed to first names months ago. Is everything all right with the portfolio?" "Better than all right." He gestured for me to sit. "I've been impressed with your management. You've consistently outperformed the market, even in volatile conditions." "Thank you." I settled into the chair across from him. "The option strategy we implemented has been particularly effective." He nodded. "Which brings me to why I called you here today." He pushed a folder across the desk. "I'd like to offer you an opportunity." Inside the folder was a proposal that made my breath catch. Robert wanted to seed a new investment fund, with me as the managing partner. The initial capital, $50 million. "I don't understand," I said, looking up from the documents. "You want me to leave Grant Pierce Butler?" "I want you to start your own firm," he corrected. "With my backing. You've proven your abilities, Nina. Why should Grant Butler profit from your talent when you could build something of your own?" The offer was stunning in its generosity and frightening in its scope. Starting my own investment firm had been a distant dream, something I'd occasionally fantasize about in quiet moments, but never seriously considered. "This is overwhelming," I admitted. "I'd need time to think about it." "Of course." He smiled understanding. "Take a week. But know this, I believe in you, Nina. More importantly, I believe in your judgment. That's rarer than you might think in this business." I left his office in a daze, the folder clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Could I really do this? Start my own firm? Become not just a manager of wealth, but a creator of it? The question consumed me for days. I made lists of pros and cons, consulted with trusted colleagues, and spent long nights staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, weighing risks against potential rewards. In the end, the decision came down to a simple truth. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I resigned from Grant Pierce Butler the following Monday. My boss was shocked but grudgingly supportive when I explained the opportunity. "Franklin's backing carries weight," he acknowledged. "But the market is brutal to newcomers, Nina, even with his seed money." "I'm aware of the risks," I assured him. "But I believe in my strategy." He studied me for a moment. "You've changed since that night at the Westbrook Gala. Harder, more focused, clearer," I corrected, "about what I want and what I'm worth." 2 months later, Lawrence Capital Management opened its doors in a modest office space in the financial district. I hired selectively, a risk analyst I'd worked with at Grant Pierce Butler, a tech specialist from a competing firm, and an operations manager with impeccable credentials. We started small, managing Robert's seed money and a handful of accounts from clients who had followed me from my previous firm. The hours were brutal, the pressure intense, but for the first time since my divorce, I felt fully alive. Then came the article in Bloomberg Business that changed the trajectory of Lawrence Capital Management forever. Rising from the ashes, how Nina Lawrence built a $100 million fund from the wreckage of divorce. The piece detailed my professional journey, from promising analyst to founder of one of the fastest-growing boutique investment firms in Manhattan. It mentioned Daniel only in passing, noting that after our divorce, he had joined forces with the Westbrook family to launch TechVault, a fintech startup with ambitious goals but uneven performance. The article went viral in financial circles. By the end of the week, my office had received dozens of inquiries from potential clients and investors. "We need to hire more staff," my operations manager announced during our morning meeting. "We can't handle this level of interest with our current team." I nodded, still processing the sudden attention. "Draw up a staffing plan. We'll need to be selective." The firm grew rapidly over the next 6 months. Our assets under management doubled, then tripled. We moved to larger offices. I was invited to speak at financial conferences, appear on business news programs, and contribute to industry publications. Success, it seemed, was the best revenge, even though revenge had never been my goal. Then came the day I had subconsciously been both dreading and anticipating. The day Daniel Reed walked back into my life. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Ms. Lawrence, there's a Daniel Reed here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." My heart stuttered. Did he say what this is regarding? He mentioned TechVault and a potential investment opportunity. Of course. Not a personal visit, but a business proposition. I shouldn't have been surprised. "Send him in," I decided after a moment's hesitation. Better to face him directly than wonder what he wanted. When Daniel stepped through my door, I was struck by how simultaneously familiar and foreign he seemed. The same dark hair, now with distinguished touches of gray at the temples. The same blue eyes that used to look at me with love. But his expression was different, tighter, more guarded. "Nina," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "Thank you for seeing me." "Daniel." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you?" He sat, his posture rigid. "You've done well for yourself. The Bloomberg piece barely does you justice." "Thank you," I said, keeping my tone professional. "But I assume you didn't come here to discuss my press coverage." He smiled slightly, direct as ever. He placed a folder on my desk, an echo of Robert Franklin's gesture that had changed my life. "TechVault is preparing for a Series C funding round. I thought you might be interested in the opportunity." I raised an eyebrow. "Why would you think that?" "Your fund has been investing heavily in fintech," he pointed out. "Our metrics are strong. Our growth trajectory is impressive, and we've just secured a major contract with a Fortune 100 company." I opened the folder, scanning the prospectus with practiced eyes. The numbers were indeed impressive, but something felt off. "What happened to Westbrook's investment?" I asked, looking up to meet his gaze. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Howard is restructuring his portfolio. He's still supportive, but diversifying our investor base makes sense at this stage." Translation: Howard Westbrook was pulling back. "Interesting. I'll need to review this with my team," I said noncommittally. "We have a thorough due diligence process." Daniel nodded, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. "Of course. Just if you could expedite the review? The funding window is somewhat tight." "Very interesting." "Daniel," I set the folder aside. "Why are you really here? There are dozens of investment firms in this city. Why approach the one run by your ex-wife?" He held my gaze for a long moment before his shoulders slumped slightly. "Because you're one of the few people who would understand the technology behind TechVault. Because your fund has a reputation for making decisions based on fundamentals rather than hype. And because..." He hesitated. "I trust your judgment." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. He hadn't trusted my judgment enough to work through our marital problems, but he trusted me with the future of his company? "I see," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "As I said, we'll review the materials." He rose to leave, then paused at the door. "You look good, Nina. Happy." The comment caught me off guard. "I am," I replied honestly. "I found my path." Something like regret flashed across his face. "I'm glad." And then he was gone, leaving behind the folder and a lingering scent of the cologne he'd always worn. I sat at my desk long after he'd left, turning the encounter over in my mind. His company needed money, that much was clear. But why now? And why approach me? I buzzed my assistant. "Sarah, can you have Ryan come to my office? And pull everything we have on Tech Vault and the Westbrook investment portfolio." Something wasn't adding up, and I intended to find out what. Ryan, my head of research, appeared within minutes, eager for the challenge. "Tech Vault? Isn't that your ex's company?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And I need you to dig deep. Financials, client contracts, Westbrook's involvement, everything." "On it," he promised, already making notes. "Anything specific I should look for?" I considered the question. Signs of financial distress. And any connection to Olivia Westbrook-Reed's personal finances. His eyebrows rose at that, but he nodded without comment. 3 days later, Ryan returned with a comprehensive analysis that confirmed my suspicions. "Tech Vault is in trouble," he announced, spreading documents across my desk. "They're burning cash faster than they're generating revenue. Their major contract has performance penalties they're unlikely to meet, and here's the kicker. Howard Westbrook isn't just restructuring his investment. He's pulling out entirely." I studied the evidence, a cold clarity settling over me. "And Olivia?" Ryan's expression turned grim. "Her trust fund is nearly depleted. She's been pouring money into Tech Vault to keep it afloat. And there's more. They've mortgaged the Tribeca penthouse to the hilt." The picture was becoming clear. Daniel and Olivia were on the verge of financial collapse. Their glittering life, built on her family's money and his entrepreneurial dreams, was crumbling beneath them. "What's your recommendation?" I asked, though I already knew what Ryan would say. "From a purely financial perspective?" He shook his head. "Stay away. The technology has potential, but the company structure is too unstable, the burn rate too high, and the leadership too compromised by personal financial pressures." I nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "Thank you, Ryan. That will be all." After he left, I sat alone in my office, weighing options that had nothing to do with financial returns and everything to do with emotional closure. I could reject the investment outright, a clean, business-justified refusal that would nevertheless feel like personal retribution. I could approve a partial investment, enough to signal confidence in the technology, but not enough to save the company from its underlying issues. Or I could meet with Daniel and Olivia together, lay out the problems with brutal clarity, and offer a restructuring plan that would save the company, but dilute their control significantly. Each option had its appeal. Each would yield a different kind of satisfaction. In the end, I chose a fourth path, one that surprised even me. I called Daniel the next morning. "I've reviewed the materials," I said without preamble. "I'd like to discuss them in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "Bring Olivia." There was a pause on the line. "Olivia? Why would?" "Because this concerns both of you." I cut in. 3 o'clock. They arrived precisely on time, Daniel looking cautiously optimistic, Olivia visibly tense. The dynamic between them was noticeably strained, nothing like the united front they'd presented at the gala 18 months earlier. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've completed my review of Tech Vault's prospectus and supporting materials." "And?" Daniel prompted when I didn't immediately continue. I met his gaze directly. "The technology is sound. The business model has potential. But the company's financial structure is unsustainable." Olivia stiffened. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," I replied calmly. "I'm stating facts. Your father is withdrawing his investment. Your personal funds are depleted. And the company is 3 months from insolvency unless you secure significant new capital." Daniel's face paled. "How did you?" "It's my job to know." I cut in. "Just as it's my job to make investment decisions based on data, not emotion." "So you're rejecting the investment," Olivia said flatly. Because of your history with Daniel. I smiled slightly. Actually, I'm proposing an alternative. I slid a document across the desk. Lawrence Capital Management will acquire a controlling interest in TechVault's intellectual property while maintaining the existing management team, with some restructuring. Daniel skimmed the document, his expression shifting from shock to disbelief. This would make you the majority owner. It would make my firm the majority owner, I corrected. You would retain operational control of the technology development, which is your strength. The business management would shift to my team, which is our strength. This is ridiculous, Olivia scoffed. You're trying to steal Daniel's company. No, I said evenly. I'm offering to save it. At considerably above market value, given the circumstances. Daniel studied me, really looked at me perhaps for the first time since our marriage ended. Why would you do this? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken history. Because I believe in the technology, I answered truthfully. And because ending something valuable out of spite isn't good business. He flinched slightly at the implied parallel to our marriage. We need time to consider this, he said finally. You have 24 hours, I replied. After that, my offer expires. Olivia looked ready to argue, but Daniel silenced her with a look. We'll be in touch. After they left, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The encounter had been draining but clarifying. I had faced my past and offered not revenge, but a solution that served my business interests while acknowledging the value in what Daniel had built. The call came exactly 23 hours later. We accept your terms, Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral. With one requested modification. Which is, I want a right of first refusal if you ever decide to sell your stake. The request surprised me. It suggested Daniel still believed in TechVault's future, despite everything. Agreed, I said after a moment's consideration. Have your lawyers contact mine to finalize the details. There was a pause. Nina, thank you. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing myself to remember the man I had once loved, before ambition and Olivia Westbrook had consumed him. It's just business, Daniel, I said finally. Nothing more. But as I hung up, I knew that wasn't entirely true. The acquisition was sound business, yes. But my willingness to offer Daniel a lifeline rather than watch him drown, that was something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition that moving forward required releasing the past, not avenging it. 2 weeks later, the acquisition was complete. Lawrence Capital Management added TechVault's innovative payment processing system to its growing portfolio of fintech investments. The business press noted the irony of the situation, Daniel Reed's company being saved by his ex-wife's investment firm, but the coverage was generally positive. I maintained a professional distance, allowing my operational team to manage the integration while Daniel continued to lead the technology development. It was a clean, efficient arrangement that benefited both parties. Until the evening Olivia Westbrook Reed appeared unannounced at my apartment door. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me before I could object. She looked different, the polished perfection replaced by visible strain. Her designer clothing hung slightly loose on her frame, and her eyes held a haunted quality I recognized from my own post-divorce mirror. Please come in, I said dryly, closing the door behind her. She paced my living room like a caged animal. Why did you do it? You'll need to be more specific, I replied, leaning against the doorframe. Why did I do what? Save TechVault. Save Daniel. She stopped pacing to face me. You could have destroyed us both. Why didn't you? I considered her question carefully. Because destruction wasn't my goal. Wasn't it? She laughed bitterly. If I were in your position, it would have been mine. I know, I said simply. Something in my tone made her study me more closely. You've changed. So have you, I observed. Though perhaps not by choice. She flinched, then sank onto my couch, the fight suddenly leaving her. Daddy cut me off. After the acquisition, he said I disgraced the family by letting our company fall into your hands. The irony of Howard Westbrook's position wasn't lost on me. He had been happy enough when Daniel left me for his daughter. less so when Daniel's company required my intervention. "I'm sorry," I said, surprising myself with my sincerity. "That must be difficult." "Don't patronize me." Olivia's voice lacked its usual bite. "I know you must be enjoying this." The tables completely turned. I moved to sit in the chair opposite her. "Believe it or not, Olivia, I don't spend much time thinking about you or Daniel these days. I'm too busy running my company." She looked around my apartment, tasteful but not ostentatious, comfortable but not extravagant. Nothing like the Tribeca penthouse she and Daniel had mortgaged to the hilt. "You really are a millionaire now, aren't you?" she asked quietly. "Not just managing money, but actually wealthy in your own right." "Financial success was never my primary goal," I replied. "But yes, Lawrence Capital Management has been very profitable." "Daniel talks about you sometimes," she said abruptly. "About how brilliant you always were. How you could see patterns in the market that others missed." She twisted her enormous engagement ring, the one that had made my simple band look laughably inadequate. "He says he made a mistake." I felt a pang of something. Not longing, exactly, but a wistful acknowledgement of what might have been. "We all make mistakes, Olivia. The question is what we build afterward." She stood abruptly. "I should go."
At the door, she paused.
"For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how things happened. Not that I met Daniel, I did love him, still do. But for flaunting it. Being cruel to you at the gala." The apology, however qualified, seemed genuine. "Thank you," I said simply. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and moved to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. In the reflection of the glass, I could see the woman I had become. Confident, successful, at peace with my past. The Nina that Daniel had left behind no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had transformed pain into power and betrayal into success. My phone rang, breaking my reverie. Robert Franklin's name flashed on the screen. "Nina," he said warmly when I answered. "I just heard about the Tech Vault acquisition. Masterful move." "Thank you," I replied, still gazing at the city lights. It made financial sense. And emotional sense too, I imagine. His perceptiveness remained uncanny. Closure has value beyond balance sheets. I smiled at his insight. "Indeed it does." "I'm calling with news," he continued. "The Westbrook Foundation is looking for new management. Howard Investments have taken several hits lately." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Lawrence Capital would be an excellent candidate to manage their endowment. The amusement in his voice was evident. Full circle, wouldn't you say? After we hung up, I sat with the possibility. Taking over the Westbrook Foundation's portfolio would be the final inversion of my former life, the ultimate evidence of how completely the tables had turned. But as I considered it, I realized I no longer needed such symbolic victories. My success wasn't defined by comparisons to Daniel's failures or by Olivia's fallen status. It stood on its own merit. The next morning, I called Robert back. "I've decided to pass on the Westbrook Foundation opportunity," I told him. "We're expanding internationally next quarter, and I want to focus our resources there." "Interesting choice," he noted. "May I ask why?" I thought about Daniel and Olivia, about the twisted path that had led me here. Looking backward, even to right old wrongs, keeps you facing the wrong direction, I answered. I prefer to look forward. As I ended the call, I felt the final weight of my past lifting. Daniel had left me for a richer woman, never imagining I would become wealthy beyond his dreams. But that irony, satisfying as it might be, was merely a footnote in my story. The fortune he left behind wasn't measured in dollars, but in the freedom to become the woman I was always meant to be.